public questions or petitions. Any members have declarations of interest on the items before us today? Thank you. Item 4, minutes of our meeting on the 24th of June. Are members happy that I'll sign those as an accurate record? Thumbs up, thank you. Because we've got external speakers today, I'm not going to deal with items 5 and 6. Immediately we'll come back to those once we've looked at the main item, which is air pollution from Woodburn. So we're now straight on to that on page 29 of our pack. We've had a submission which has been circulated from Lungs for Lungs, which members have had, which will help inform any discussion and questioning today. We've also had your report, which is circulated as part of the agenda pack and authored by Leslie Oldfield, who was the Council's Public Protection Officer, and and we've also got Professor Claire Reeves from the UA, who has a presentation with some data on it, and will be able to answer questions from us. So thank you all for being here. And Leslie, you'll kick things off and just give a brief outline of your report, and then members will weigh in with questions.
Right, PM 2.5. There's well documented evidence that very small particulates, such as PM 2.5 and smaller, can pass through the lungs into the bloodstream, causing certain health problems. Local authorities have no regulatory requirement to need to give a PM 2.5 objective levels, unlike, for example, nitrogen dioxide. The World Health Organization has, however, recommended a national target level of 10 micrograms per metre cubed and will be adopted. For the last 3 years, 2018, 19 and 20, both Norwich air quality stations have measured annual levels of that 10 micrograms per metre cubed. In Norwich, source apportionment studies show that marine sea salt is the predominant source of PM 2.5, and then secondary particulates. In Norwich, it appears domestic sources account for approximately 22% of PM 2.5. During lockdown, nitrogen dioxide levels dropped by more than 30%. PM 10 and PM 2.5 showed no reduction. Hence, PM 2.5 is not, for the most part, a traffic-related pollutant. Comparisons of PM 2.5 pollution spikes across the region confirm PM 2.5 is predominantly a trans-boundary pollutant. New air quality domestic solid fuels regulations 2020 read all new wood-burning stoves have to meet DEPA emission criteria, and the fuel also has to meet strict criteria. It's an offence to breach these regulations. It's intended through media campaigns, council website and citizen magazine to make the residents of Norwich more aware of the possible health implications of using a wood burner and how to use such appliances responsibly.
Thank you for that. I'd also like to, I should have thanked, sort of open the meeting, the member of the public that suggested this topic of scrutiny, who had to be to talk to us today, is unwell and can't. So we'll try and actually pick that up at another meeting. But, so thank you for that, Leslie. We take some questions first, and then perhaps once those questions are finished, we'll bring in Claire at that point. So can I have some questions for Leslie, please? Councillor Osborne.
Thanks. Yeah, also I think the reason that the process topic for the question is just about so there's got 2 questions. One is about kind of air pollution you get from wood burning. So do we have an idea of the impact of PM 2.5 versus, for example, volatile organic compounds, VOCs, So my second question is about using wood burners responsibly. What does that mean in practice?
I think the first question is very complicated, so I wondered if Claire might be able to answer that one. The second question about using a wood burner responsibly is basically understanding whether you have certified appliance, getting it serviced regularly, cleaned out, etc., and obviously using the correct fuel.
Can I bring you in on Councillor Osborne's first point there, and then I think Councillor Osborne put in a follow-up and wants to come back with that.
Right. Okay, so right, volatile organic compounds. There are various rules related to them, but it's more at extremely high levels. What we're more concerned about VOCs, volatile organic compounds, in terms of what they might they actually react to form. So they can actually react and form less volatile compounds, which can contribute further to particulate, but by the less volatile compounds condense onto particulate. So they contribute to what Leslie described as the secondary source of the air. And they also contribute to the formation of ozone, which is another thing that we're concerned about. And wood burners will give off both VOCs and primary particulate, so the emit direct particulate as well as emit VOCs that can not to form more particle matter. I think the question is actually about the health issue. This is something that's not well known about at all. In fact, particulate matter is made up of a whole range of different compounds, some of which are these condensed organics, and as yet the medical science is not clear on whether it's the composition of the different components of the particulate that they
Councillor Osborne with a follow-up question.
Two points, so one for on the using of the wood fires responsibly. I see the graph definitely is showing the amount of emissions to get to 2.5 in cyclone from different domestic heating systems. The amount of getting 2.5 from wood burns, even from definitely exempt ones, is still very significant. It's a shame we can't project it onto 100% is to be with projecting onto the space. You can see the visual representation of it.
So which is
of the amount of PM 2.5 emissions comes even from definitely exempt to be say the compared to other forms of heating.
so, and that's the page in the report. Yes.
It's not in the report.
No,
I've got a it's the only.
Right. Okay. Are you in a position at the moment to be hooked up and to receive something from Councillor Osborne safely through? Okay. Yeah.
I believe that one of my slides might have pictures that
right, okay.
Is it one of those?
It's just a more issue.
Right. So the one on the right hand side it basically shows different fuel types, different heatings, what different poisons. So maybe that's not the one we want, but
Does that include the definitely exempt?
so it's hard to see one of those orange bars is the energy efficient. So let's see which one that is. Yes, it's brown.
Yeah, we've got. Bear with us 1 second. We've actually got printed copies of those, which will now circulate to members. So, I think it looks like the projector is a square aspect ratio, and the presentation is wide angle. It's widescreen. It's still cutting it off.
No, it's covering all of them.
So it's the orange one, the advanced installation wood stove.
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's fine, yeah. Well, I'll grade on the laptop. So, right, where were we? So briefings. That's Osborne, did you have a?
Maybe just
Yeah. Okay. We're sort of taking questions. I know we sort of brought Claire in there. We were taking in questions from Leslie. Why don't we, because I think it's probably inevitable it's going to go this way anyway. Claire, do you want to give us a brief overview of the various slides that you've got, and then maybe we've got all the information, and then we can basically mix and match the questions as we go through.
Okay, yes.
To the beginning.
Yes, please. Yes, so the purpose of this slide is really to demonstrate that there's a large number of sources of particulate matter. As I mentioned before, there's primary sources and there are secondary sources. What you see on the two bottom graphs there are transects across the country. First one on the left-hand side is a picture that goes from the left-hand side to the north to the south, so London's towards the right-hand side. And on the right-hand image, it's a transect going from London to Bristol, but the other way from Bristol towards London. A point that I really wanted to make is that the wood burner contribution, or the domestic source of the burner, is the red bit, which is the bit at the top, more spiky bit. So it is, you know, it's a sizable contribution, but it's on top of an awful lot of other particulate matter. And much of the blue at the bottom, really, the large sections there, are actually what we call distant sources, largely secondary sources, that have been formed sometimes as far away as Europe, but across a whole wide region. So you can, in terms of putting any controls in locally, you can only affect a small proportion of particulate matter. And there's a large part of it which is outside a local authority's control. So that's really the main point there. Leslie mentioned the WHO threshold, and it's going to, the issue that everyone will have across the country is that the sort of background concentrations aren't far from that level. So trying to get below that will always be a very difficult, if not potentially almost impossible task. That's just some background. So yeah, I think it's just important to understand that particulate matter comes from lots and lots of different sources. So things that you can see, like wood burning, smoke, exhaust pipes from motor vehicles. But the biggest source of motor vehicles now is actually from the tyre and brake wear and road corrosion. But then a very large proportion comes from these gases which are emitted from, for example, burning, so VOCs and nitrogen oxides, and also other things like ammonia that comes largely from agricultural waste, from slurry, from manure. And these are gases which get into the atmosphere, they react and form less volatile compounds, and they condense onto the particulate matter and create this sort of insensitive particles is a mixture of lots of different chemicals. That's the message I really wanted to get across that first slide. If we go on to the next slide, thank you. These are estimates from the National essence of emissions coming from the National Atmospheric Emission Inventory. So bear in mind that these estimates are just the primary components, not secondary as well. You have total at the top and the different coloured bars of different years, so it sort of shows how things have changed over time. Domestic combustion is the second block of colour. So whilst the total emissions of primary particles has decreased substantially as you go from the dark bar to the lighter bar, domestic combustion is actually, well, went down slightly, but then went back up to the previous levels. So wood burning is becoming a greater proportion of the emissions now as other sources like motor vehicle sources have decreased. But I should say that these estimates are highly uncertain. These are national numbers that are being derived from estimates of the amount of fuel that's used. But as we discussed already, the way you burn that fuel can vary, the emissions that you get from that can really vary enormously depending on whether how wet the moisture in the wood, also how efficient the burn is. So there's very large uncertainties in those numbers. Okay. Yes, moving on to the next one, which is the one we saw before. It's on the left-hand side, you've got open fireplaces. On the right-hand side, you've got boilers and stoves. This is all residential. And it's just really showing that it would, with the orange, yellow orange bars on the left-hand side, obviously a much bigger emittance of particulate matter than natural gas, which is the other things mentioned better. And as already pointed out by the councillor, different boilers which stoves on burn in different ways and different efficiencies can give different amounts of particulate, but they still, even the most efficient ones, will emit particulate. So that's sort of kind of background information based on documents that are sort of government published, like the Clean Air Strategy and the Air Quality Expert Group reports. The next slides I've got are some analysis of some of the data that we collected at Baconfields and Castle Medwich, to their water sites in Norwich. Would you like to go through?
Very, very helpful.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that the point I just want to make is that this is actually analysis I've just done in the last week, so it is very good in preparation for this meeting. What I'm looking at is our concentrations, okay, they're not emissions, but what I'm trying to do is infer what emissions might be, maybe a contribution from wood burners as a result of the sort of patterns that we see in the data. So it is very much inferred, and it's not, I can't quantify anything. And I have to say, I'm not familiar with the data that has been mentioned about where the different proportions of sources come from, so I can't back that up at all. So I've actually sort of taken the liberty in the first slide not to show particulate matter, but to show nitrogen oxides. And this is for comparison because it is largely road traffic. The red line, which is the top one, is for Castle Meadow, which is roadside site, and the blue, the bottom line is for Baconfields, which is an urban background site not far from County Hall. And what you can see is that at the roadside site, this is data from 2011 to the end of 2020, concentrations have come down quite a lot, and that's because of policies to try and reduce nitrogen dioxide in the centre of Norwich. But Baconfields doesn't show that pattern, and 2020 is in there because it also is affected by the COVID lockdown. So that's a sort of, it indicates changes to motor vehicle emissions and so on. The next slide is particulate matter, and you see, again, it's the same period of time. Again, the red line is Castle Meadow, and the blue is Baconfields. It's a completely different pattern. So it's backing up what Leslie said, that there are the sources of particulate matter are not primarily road traffic. It's not showing the same pattern, and it's obviously the other one we saw, the nitrogen oxide not higher at the roadside site. Here, the particulate measurements are fairly similar at both sites, and so again, it's showing it's not really roadside data, and there's no clear decrease, sorry, roadside sources, there's no clear decrease in the lockdown. Analysis which the student Ryan did previously shows that the patterns that are observed in Norwich are very similar to those observed at other sites across these angles, so in Bedford, Southend, and particulate matter, which shows it's very much a regional problem. If you have an episode where you have increased concentrations, it tends to occur across the whole of the region. Okay, we move on to the next slide. So on the left-hand side, you've got naked fields. On the right-hand side, you've got Castle Meadow. So this is all the data from 2011 to 2019. I excluded 2020 because of COVID. And it shows the red is sort of the highest sort of value. So the top plots are concentration data. It's organised by wind direction, so it's which direction the wind was coming from. And the distance out from the centre is the wind speed. So what we see at both naked fields and Castle Meadow in the top plots is that the highest concentrations tend to come when the wind is coming from the east. And they tend to come where wind speeds tend to be the higher wind speeds. And that's illustrative of long-range transport in events where we get pollution coming across Europe. The top line says concentration. The bottom plots are weighted by the contribution from different directions. So that takes into account the fact that we get far more of our wind from the southwest. So what it shows here, the red now is in the southwest corner, so it's showing, although the high concentrations tend to occur when we have easterly airflow, because we get prompt air from the southwest, actually that's where the majority of the particulate matter that we get overall comes from. But it's also at lower wind speeds, so it tends to suggest it's more local. Not necessarily specifically Norwich, but this could be the sort of pollution within the southeast of the UK. Okay, if we can move on to the next slide. Okay, so what we've got here are diurnal patterns of particulates at PM2.5, and it's been divided up into data from different wind sectors. This is all the data from naked fields now, so as a bird background side. So if we look at the top two right-hand images, there's not a lot of change over the time of day. It's fairly constant time of day. And again, that's consistent with those when the air is coming from the east and with higher concentrations, it's more of this long-range transport. In the other sectors, the other wind sectors, we start to see diurnal patterns. Now, these diurnal patterns, I'm afraid, again, it is rather complicated because one of the key issues is that pollution gets trapped close to the surface. These data are all collected near the surface. So it depends on how well the atmosphere mixes and the dispersions and how well that is sort of cleared or whether the pollution gets trapped there. And this will change the time of day. The temperature changes the time of day, and at night we tend to get more stable conditions and the pollution tends to get trapped. So that partly contributes to the higher concentrations that you see at night. Also, as was mentioned before, we have these what we call these volatile components. And if the temperature changes, so it warms up during the daytime, the more volatile components of the particulate matter will actually go from the particulate matter into the gas phase. And then when it cools at night, then it can come back onto the particulate matter. So again, that might affect these diurnal patterns. So bearing those in mind, what you do see are highest concentrations at night, maybe some indication of possibly sort of rush hour peaks, but the nighttime also would be consistent with, for example, people using wood burners in the heat, right? So it's just a potential there, but there are lots of caveats. If we move on to the next slide, which is again showing these diurnal patterns. This is for all wind sectors. The blue data here is for naked fields, and the red is for Castle Meadow. And this is just comparing what you see at the roadside site versus an urban background site. So the red line, Castle Meadow, different panels here at different times of year, and you can see quite clearly these peaks that are occurring around the sort of rush hour periods. You also see the peak in winter is slightly earlier, and again that's partly because of the this boundary effect. Obviously it gets darker early in the day, so it's the temperature change. If you compare vacant fields, and don't, this is perhaps some evidence of an early morning rush hour, but again it's much more of an evening peak that's later than rush hour, and it's also in the winter you can see it much more clearly, which again will be consistent potentially with woodlands. Again, this is all rather circumstantial. And the final slide again is very similar. This is all data from vacant fields. The black line is the particulate matter, so essentially it's the same as the blue line on the previous slide, but on a different scale. And for comparison, we've got the NO2. And as we mentioned before, the NO2 is a better indicator of traffic. So particularly, for example, in winter, you can see the traffic peak in the NO2 towards sort of our late afternoon, early evening. It's not at the same time as the peak in the particulate. So none of this is anywhere near conclusive, but I just thought it might give you a flavour of trying to understand the particulate matter. It's complicated. It's not the road traffic sources. There may be some indication that burning, or it may be eating source. It could be other things like cooking. A lot of cooking will give out particulate matter or these volatile organic compounds. There's an awful lot to unpick from this. But all of this is going to superimpose on the background level as well. So I hope that's helpful, although it's still very complicated.
Thank you very much for that. It's fascinating, and I don't pretend for one moment to have understood everything you said there. But those graphs were really interesting. Actually, I've got a number of questions that don't necessarily relate to wood burners, but sort of thinking about some of the things you were saying with the breakdown of tyres and things. Actually, it's been perceived that the move to electric vehicles might be considered to be some sort of panacea, but actually, because it's not, because they've still got tyres that are breaking down some so forth. Anyway, it's all about wood burners today. So I think Councillor Galvin had her hand up some time ago. So Councillor Galvin, to you first, and then I've noted Councillor Carlo and Councillor Watson.
Thank you very much. Really, really useful presentation. Really grateful for that. I wanted to ask a question about point source pollution, because obviously the measuring is being done at these two sites, the kind of wider flow of pollution in the wider air. But as I understand it, the reason governments brought in new legislation for air quality, etc., point source pollution. In other words, if you're in a room with a wood burner or a fire, you get a fair amount of this, or standing with a bonfire. So then that will diffuse into the wider air. So is there any way of recording? Well, one question is there any way, or does anyone have a way of recording that point source pollution, which is obviously very detrimental to health, because you're getting a higher load of it, and that's why there is a law around it now. And we're a bit hampered by our recording stations not really picking that up, I suppose, because I'd say Castle Meadow there won't be much there in terms of there wouldn't necessarily that much either. But do we need more recordings? Is there any way of recording from these sources? That's clearly what the main issues in terms of health and wood burning.
This is a major problem, and trying to understand the contribution wood burners make is difficult because they are, as you point out, they are point sources. And unless you monitor lots and lots of different genes that it's extremely difficult to be able to understand what's coming out of it in terms of that pollution. So the approach that is taken by DEFRA and local authorities is to measure at a number of different sites, different sources. The Castle Reading is primary there, is a great definition of oxide, I would suggest, whereas the local sites are the definite. I should say that it is important that Parliament at the moment in different stages, and within the environment there will be, or there is legislation to come up with a new target particulate matter in general. And there's been a series of consultations over the last years on Joe trying to determine what those targets will be, and they're looking at both as sort of bringing down the level, which we say the system can, but also looking at something that's related to exposure. And again, these things have to be able to sort of integrate across large areas, because unless you do sample many sites, you just do not know exactly those points. And the big issue of trying to say what the emissions are is there's been very few studies that sort of track them. So you can look at any burner, but it's so difficult to capture lots and lots of them. And just to pick up on the indoor pollution, there's even less work done on exposure. And of course, every house is different. So it's really different. So the way that we tend to do this is to monitor for background sites and try and get that
Brittany, do you have anything else to add on that? In mind, presumably, picking up on the point about it's expensive to monitor in lots of places, presumably that's why we have sort of 2 fixed locations that have been there. I guess they give a consistency over the years, the fact that you're always recording the same data in the same place. I suppose anecdotally, there is a city where wood burners might be more prolific than other areas of the city, but not necessarily monitors them. But anyway,
I think you were just about to say what I was going to say. Yeah, I mean, the 2 air quality stations, to be able to get the accuracy of the data, you know, it's you've got to know exactly the circumstances and the environment and the rest of it to be able to do anything with that data. And there are such things as mobile monitors, but they won't give you the accurate results that you probably require to be able to get some, not at this stage anyway.
That's a car.
It's like you guys for presentation showing how complex the subject is. I've got 3 questions, please. Firstly, if in the future we manage as a society to stop burning carbon from a number of different sources, wood, coal, gas, all types of shipping, for example, and we change our farming practices, so we no longer putting artificial fertilizer on the field. To disaggregate from that, by what percentage or what sources would 2.5 be coming from? By how much of a reduction could we achieve? Bearing in mind that the WHO is saying it's giving it's saying that there's no safe limit, but it's giving an approximate value of 10 micrograms per cubic metre. And the Clean Air Strategy 2019, DEFRA strategy, does take the WHO and the Green Guideline of 10, I just wondered if that's going to, given the uncertainties around that, if that's going to come down further. And then my third question is to ask about passive housing, where you're maybe changing the ventilation within the domestics or within the building situation. And does that cause a problem? Thank you.
Up to you, who wants to go first to pick up various aspects of that.
So, as I said, there's lots of different sources, and if we do get rid of, as you say, the combustion sources, there's still a number of natural sources. Designated sea salt. There's going to be dust from soil, from farmland. We mentioned previously road abrasion. And also there are volatile organic compounds that are given off just from plants. So that if you go to pine forest, you smell pine, and that's a volatile organic compound which can lead to the formation of plant. So part of the government's sort of pathway to determining what PM targets is going to put into the environment is to do some modelling work to try and look at what is achievable if we remove various different sources exactly as you described. And it's something that's still in progress, but it's going to be very difficult, to be honest, to get below 10 micrograms per metre cubed because of these other sources. And we also will rely on, in particular, Europe following similar controls, because at times, as you said, we can get sources from there. So I think we will never get rid of all particulate matters, even if the WHO levels, if they say that there is no safe level, it's just part of living. We will have to accept that, but obviously we want to try and minimise exposure when we can. Import pollution is something that's not had very much research relative to outdoor pollution, and the targets that we looked at all to do in outdoor. But the air quality expert group that I'm on is also working with the Climate Change Committee, and we're looking at the links between what we call the road to net zero and decarbonisation and the impacts that might have on air quality. And buildings and ventilation are obviously a key aspect of that, in particular for indoor exposure. So there are, in that case, there is a tension potentially, and so it's something that builders will have to think carefully about in the construction of new buildings, how we can reduce loss of heat and so on, but at the same time have reasonable ventilation. So it is an issue that's being addressed, but it's not straightforward.
No, not really. It's just obviously, as Claire says, a lot of PM 2.5 is a trans boundary pollutant. It's quite difficult for the government to actually ask councils to come down to a certain level that they've got no control over, predominantly. So that's the sticking point. And particularly, as Claire says, it's coming over from Europe and various other far-reaching places, then everyone has to adopt the same policy.
Thank you very much. Councillor.
Thanks. I appreciate how difficult it is to measure. As you say, if this is predominantly climate boundary, is there also some even if we don't know exactly, we don't have the measurements or exactly the sort of impact or the cumulative impact of wood burning in indoor properties, is given that we're looking at wood burning for this and predominantly from domestic properties for this topic. Would you say that wood burning inside house or is inside a pub, for example, when there are very often open fires, is in broad terms bad. So that's the sort of impression that I had from reading the articles and reading some books about it. And maybe that doesn't show up, it's maybe that's downward factors. Maybe that doesn't show up because it sort of gets dispersed once it's out to the, but once we're in those space, then it's bad. Is that right? Yeah.
So we've got an anecdotal view that it's bad, but
Yes,
the scientists to corroborate an
Yeah,
anecdotal.
Council Schmier actually, Council Schmier went around with a plume and monitor and measured all around the city, and it was all right. And we actually went next to a wood burning stove in a pub, and it just went right off the charts. I've seen other charts in it.
Undoubtedly, wood burners and other open fires give particular. We can smell it, we can often see it. So anybody who's close to a fire of that nature, and is burning will be exposed to higher amounts of particles, and we do know that they damage health. So that is undoubted.
So I suppose the follow-up to that question is, given that is the case, and this is a question for Leslie, what can we as the council do? And that is link between the burning of material and particulates, particularly when it comes to maybe our licensed trade.
I think certainly at this stage, one of the best things we can do is just make people aware. So I think the council needs to get the information out there that the effects that wood burners can have and how to use them responsibly. You are going to have a wood burner. It's just, as I mentioned before, Citizen magazine, on our website, and also the media campaigns and things like that, and just make people responsible for, through educating, making sure that they're aware, and just be responsible for their own actions.
I think before I bring in Councillor from Councillor next, then Councillor Gowan, and then Councillor Osborne, and then Councillor Steve. I think it's probably from responsible approach, is that related to the sort of types of fuel and that sort of thing in terms of wood burner?
I think we can make it fairly broad. I think to identify that wood burners will put particulates into your home environment as well as up through the chimney. But yes, what fuel to use? I mean, it's now all fuel has to have a ready to burn logo on. So we don't actually regulate that. It's trading standards to make sure that all fuel is meets the right legal requirements. Yes, just on that nature.
Thank you very much, Councillor McAllister.
Thanks, Chair. So I've got certainly one question for Leslie, and I might have a number of follow-ups depending on the answer. In the report that you've really helpfully written, point number 11 about the about the smoke control areas. Norwich has 3 smoke control areas, and they're both for King Street and near the airport, I believe. You state that it will make no difference regard to any new wood burners being installed, which I can understand, or the fuel being burned for the reasons given above. Why is it that it will make no difference to the fuel being burnt in general?
Because all fuel now has to be ready to burn, so it has to be kiln dried, be less than 20% water. So can't have burn fuel that will emit smoke.
But you can in a non-smoke controlled area, you can still burn, for example, wood. Whereas in a smoke controlled area, my understanding is you can't burn wood, you have to burn a pre-approved fuel, and wood is not one of those pre-approved fuels.
I thought provided it had to be certified fuel, you could.
So looking at the list of certified fuels on the DEFRA website, there are a number of different brands of wood briquettes and other things, but there is not, from what I can see, and this might be my misunderstanding, I can't see just ordinary kiln-dried wood as being one of those approved fuels.
I understood it differently, but I could stand to be corrected on that one.
Okay, because where you are absolutely right is it wouldn't stop the installation of wood burners because they're still allowed, they're exempt devices, and the list is quite significant. And those wood burners are still allowed to burn wood. But in an open fireplace, for example, you couldn't burn wood. From my understanding, you don't burn the things on the approved list, which are lots of various types of smokeless briquettes. But if we look at the majority of residents in Norwich, I know that this report was put together specifically with wood burners in mind, but I think that the entire committee want to stop any harmful particulates in general, rather than just those from wood burners. And open fires are also part of the concerns that members of the committee are raising. So just looking at the stuff which can be burnt in open fires, obviously, if you're in a smoke control area, you wouldn't be able to burn wood, you wouldn't be able to burn coal. You could burn very specific, highly regulated versions of things. And I think that it would be a slight misrepresentation to say that it wouldn't stop all of the fuel which can currently be burnt in a non-smoke control area to be burnt in a smoke control area, which leads on to my next question, which is how would we go about expanding the number of smoke control areas we have? For example, I'm thinking there's very few residents in our city who are in the incredibly unfortunate position where they have to burn a fuel for their everyday warmth, unless it's gas, etc. There's very few who don't have central heating. Those who don't have central heating will probably be outside of the area such as the Golden Triangle, where there's the largest amount of people with fires, whether they're wood burners or open fires. How would we look at introducing the whole of the Golden Triangle as a smoke-free area? What would be the process for that?
Before you answer the question, can I add a rider onto there, just to something I don't understand? With a sort of, if there's a smoke control area, does that impact also on things like garden bonfires and things like that? So actually,
they're exempt.
Oh, they're exempt, are they?
Yes.
So
It's only if
they
there's
don't
specific
go ahead.
commercial.
They don't go ahead. So there's additional smoke control.
To be honest, the ones that we have, 3, which are at the airport and King Street and Bothorpe as well, I mean, they're historic, they've been in place a long time. I don't know what they particularly, why those particular areas were chosen. Perhaps the airport is might be quite obvious, but the others I don't know, and how you would go about implementing some more. There's no doubt some regulations that we would have to apply for something that to be able to implement them.
Would that be needed to apply to central government, or do we have that power ourselves? Could we introduce a bylaw essentially without having interference from central government?
I don't know the answer to that. I haven't looked into it.
I actually looked at this when we were considering this item before, and the government website is largely unhelpful in terms of what it says about smoke control areas, because it says contact your council, but there doesn't really seem to be great information as to what the council itself is supposed to do. So I think certainly there's some more research to do there, but it isn't very obvious. You know, there are some things I think with government it's quite obvious where the responsibility lines lie, and this the responsibility is on the council, and there doesn't seem to be a huge amount of detail as to how we're supposed to do something about it.
I know that when we brought in the engine switch off enforcement, had to apply to the central government for road traffic regulations. So it might be a similar sort of setup for
that. Just members are putting their hands up, so everyone's aware who's on the list. Got Councillor Galvin next, then Councillor Osborne, then Councillor Stewart. So Councillor Galvin. Councillor
So we've had clarified that undoubtedly with those people particular, we know that damages health, and we've got public protection officer here, and we've kind of discussed around what the council's responsibility is. So we don't have recorded anywhere any further legal responsibility on the council around this that we know of. And that's a question. So we have obviously corporate targets of a clean or healthy city, etc., things like that, but there isn't actually, because obviously this is a health aspect that the council can have an effect on, can have an impact on. Is there a policy? And that's one thing, and the other thing I wanted to say relates to communications. Perhaps we'll save that. We'll talk about communicating this separate sort of area.
Well, you can bring it in now. And then
I'll say that, and it's just that, so, you know, talking about wood burners, they're very popular, and indeed a lot of people have been feeling like they're a green thing to do. It's better than central heating, etc. So it's quite a big leap for people to make, I think, to understand the harm involved. So it might be quite an important communications campaign. It might need to be quite strategic. We haven't got the industry that probably need to work with them on the other people and actually make sure that we went at it quite carefully. It could have quite a good impact on public health indirectly and over a long term if the council took a lead in it. But it might need to be done carefully. So that my real question is, can we zero in on what the council's responsibility is here? And when we do some communication, can it be strategic and work with partners?
thank you.
As mentioned, there's no national objective level that we have to work towards with the 2.5, but it could be coming in the environment bill. So we do monitor the 2.5. There was only the objective to reach 50% reduction at an urban background location between 2010 and 2020, which we did achieve at the Lakenfield site. So no, there is no requirement. I think the council does have a key performance indicator to try and reach an objective of 10 micrograms per metre cubed as an annual rate. But we are meeting that. But it will fluctuate. It will vary year on year. But we hope that given we've got that downward trend, have maintained that level for the last 3 years, and hoping it will only fluctuate around that level rather than but no, I think it's just if the environment bill obviously comes in and produces a national objective level, then we will have to work towards that.
Thank you. Councillor Osborne, please.
Just to clarify, first of all, is the equity still a my question, I wrote two questions. One first, come back to the other. The first one is when we talk about burning wood responsibly, I've seen some examples of councils, Hampton particularly, basically saying don't burn wood. It's not whatever, however you burn it, it gives off particulates and those particulates are bad for health. Is there any reason why we should not be telling people not to burn wood? Sorry.
I'm not really sure that's one for me to answer, to be perfectly honest. Obviously, from a pollution point of view, then yes, let's say that, but obviously it can't be enforced. We can only advise people.
Yeah, obviously, it can't be forced to say that there's nothing else, and waste well as that. Maybe it's something that the recommendation from the places what might be effective ways of communication. Is it really have really strong messaging that would burn it, sort of like similar to smoke campaigns that smoke, or is it better to have something? I don't know the answer is. Personally, I have a bit strong one. A lot of people just don't know that burning is bad for your health. And I think there is kind of fine. There's a lot of people also don't really know what burning wood responsibly is. We've had a discussion here. It's quite difficult to know what cleaner kinds of fuels are. So I don't want to say it's not. My second question is about things the council do. I think I believe there's 68 council-owned properties. I think they're domestic properties that have solid fuel heating systems. I wonder whether some of the council, what the recommendations for this could actually upgrade those to not solid fuel.
Thank you for that. I'm just doing a quick Google up here. It looks like the power for a council to issue a smoke control order comes from the 1956 Clean Air Act as amended possibly by the 1993 Clean Air Act. So there's a noise in the building. But anyway, so then we're a bit further on than where we were a few minutes ago. But whether we just have to make, there'll be a mechanism for making an order under that act. So, ask our to give some additional information about if that's
Please briefly, just Google the subject of legislation and the council's question. I think it is a matter for the local authority to adopt as a requirement to consult on it before implementation, to consider any responses that we may make before introducing it. And the Secretary of State will advertise in the London Gazette, which effectively gives the Secretary of State a calling power, so we could intervene if we wanted to in the matter, but essentially it appears to be a matter for local authority.
Thank you. Councillor Osborne, did you have a supplementary to your? Okay. you're on the bottom of the list. Councillor Stewart, you're up next, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation and report. I've got a couple of questions. I'll just, they're unrelated, so I'll just start with one that's quite basic and something that I don't think we've really covered. And that is, what health issues are known to result from exposure, and what level of exposure people who present the most serious of these health issues experience? Is that something you can answer?
Particulates basically get into your lungs, then from there into the blood. It can lead to heart disease, COPD, get into your brain, and there's some evidence that it affects children's development, mental. So there's a whole wide range of health conditions associated with it. I couldn't quantify it, I'm not an expert in that. It's quite wide ranging. The number of conditions are related to, or could be related to other causes as well. So there's a, for other reasons, for example. I'm not an expert on that.
Thank you. So if we proceed with sort of education of the public, I wonder if that could be quite hard hitting by including the situation that potentially comes from exposure, and in particular children. I reference the email that we all received yesterday, today that I read. So I think maybe there is potential for quite a hard-hitting campaign to highlight the dangers of exposure in particular. I'll come back to the question later.
Well, you can ask now if you wish.
It's unrelated. I think other people haven't spoken yet. So
Okay, Councillor Giles next.
Thanks, Chair. I'm not sure if anyone here can really answer this question, but I was wondering about what level of resources and teeth the health and safety executives have with regards to employees reporting their employer's licensed premises not using certified appliances or certified fuels. I mean, if we were to approach the health and safety executive, they'd obviously give us a civil servant answer, but I wonder if it's worth asking the trade unions if that's an issue for any of their members, and if so, what response they've had from the health and safety executive. Unless anyone really doesn't know the answer.
Would that be in terms of looking at those things, in terms of enforcement, would that matter for us, or would that be county council? So if we found out their licensed premise wasn't doing properly?
I don't know that there's any law anyway. It would have to be something that the health and safety exec, obviously health and safety exec after employees. So it'd be.
I'm just trying to join the dots, because I think if the employer has been buying wood that isn't properly certified, then presumably that is a county council matter anyway from a trading standards point of view.
Yes, yeah, correct. Sorry. Trading standards.
I mean, I was thinking from an employment perspective, obviously there's an intention to trading standards, but it'd be interesting to get the trade unions on whether or not health and safety statement has sufficient resources and team to actually deal with any reports they may get from these in the sector. I mean, there's any resources to monitor such compliance and react. Interesting.
Thank you. Councillor from McAllister, am I asking you to come in on that?
Yeah.
Your trade union hat on?
Yeah, so in terms of the resources of the Health and Safety Executive, you'll be unsurprised to hear over the last 11 years they've been cut to the bone. Frankly, the position that they are in at the moment is that they are only really dealing with the absolute biggest of catastrophes, chemical spills at places like Portsdown, dealing with oil refineries that are about to explode, etc. The problem is that powers are actually incredibly strong, and often they don't take issues such as minor in the scheme of things, thinking about things like asbestos being more major. They don't take more minor things which are carcinogenic and have other health effects seriously enough, unfortunately. In addition, on a slightly side note, they also don't take workplace stress and other matters like that in any way seriously, where members of staff have committed suicide because of workplace stress, even though actually those things can have and looking at fires in pubs, etc., where someone's working for 20 odd years, those things can have a bigger impact than in the grand scheme of things, relatively minor chemical spill at Portsdown. However, that's the position that I've certainly found a lot of my members in, and I've had members unfortunately commit suicide because of workplace stress and some of the situations around that. And yet the Health and Safety Executive weren't interested in the slightest and didn't have the resources to respond, which is incredibly disappointing. So I wouldn't expect them to take much action on this, unfortunately.
Might come back. I think it would still be worth getting that in writing from where trade unions that have members in licensed premises, and if that is the case, which was my understanding, determining anything but Chloe Smith's MP's areas, government minister in the cabinet office, maybe right to highlight this.
Be interested to know what the trade union representation looks like in licensed premises. Some feedback from them. So, Councillor Osborne, you are next.
Just on that point on the licensed premises, that it's maybe something the council can't do at all, but I wonder if food safety, which is the council, city council function, whether there's a role that they can play in when they're inspecting pubs, basically, or restaurants, or even if it's informally, talking to the staff, the management, and highlighting the health impact of fires. I think a lot of people just don't know. Think, oh, it's pretty great to have an environment as Lucy was saying earlier, doing something good now. Right? So I wonder if there's something that the council can do. Information in that sense, so maybe a little bit of whether there's any other way that the council's health function in that sense.
Do you know if we'll be able to say that as part of off the top of my head, it strikes me that possibly those food safety inspections are probably dealt with within the constraints of a fairly well-defined piece of legislation, and adding riders on to one route premise might be challenging. But great.
I think your assessment is right. Just to come in on some previous discussion, local authority has certain responsibilities for health and safety. So we've got some investigations if something's going wrong. Generally speaking, health and safety executive would only get involved in the more serious end of the spectrum because we've got a lot of qualified environmentalists. I'm trying to think about, if you like, real world solutions here. I don't think we've got any statutory power, certainly that I'm aware of, used to do any regulation or enforcement, but I think that's the same concern that we've got over the introduction of smoke control areas, that even if they are introduced, it's difficult to see what the enforcement powers are related to them, and how that might actually force people to change behaviour, because in other ways, because of regulatory powers, they don't have that many teeth. But where you do have some powers is the use of communication around it. So I wouldn't have thought using food safety officers is something that we've got any statutory responsibility for. But through the licensing teams generally, contact many of the licensees, if that seemed to be something we want to feed information, it wouldn't be anything that you could compel. I wouldn't want to give any assurance that this is going to be done. But if we've got any sort of media campaign or things highlighting key facts about that we don't think are well known to our population, then there's probably rules used to bring that same campaign. Send a leaflet, for instance, when license rules come up or something, we could slip that in the envelope if we aren't on digital, or ideally send it as a digital attachment to whatever the email reminder was.
Yeah, I wonder if there could also be a sort of positive side to that, which is the making side not kind of safe places for people, just coming back to the health impacts, the health impacts are unequally distributed.
Thank you, Matt. Helpfully, Councillor Stevens next on my list anyways came with his next question.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Actually, my next question was going to be related to the licensed industry. And that is, if someone could confirm that premises are able to use existing fireplaces, such as old fireplaces that were built with the building. And just to confirm that, and also to confirm that despite having older burning facilities, they still have to use the current controlled wood types. Did I make that clear? I didn't, did I? Shall I start again? Can you confirm that existing wood burners and fireplaces, old style fireplaces in licensed premises are permitted to be used, but do those premises have to use the special type of fuel that is referenced in paragraph 11 pack?
All wood burners have to use the ready-to-burn fuel. Only new appliances have to be the DEF certified one. So if you've got an old appliance, as far as I'm aware, you can still use that.
Thank you. Just following up what other people have said on the licensed industry. Clearly, one fire, a domestic fire, is going to emit similar amounts of smoke to any fire in a pub. So probably the contribution of the licensed industry to the whole PM 2.5s is probably going to be minimal. or a very small percentage of the total. However, of course, it is a place where people congregate, so more people will be exposed as a result of those fires. So it is something that we perhaps can look at with our recommendations. But clearly, there are no current laws that we can impose on the industry. But I'd be interested to hear whether there is a role for the public protection team, as Graham suggests.
Thank you. I've got councillors Galvin, Mann, Cole, Osborne, and Thomas. So, Councillor Galvin.
Thank you. I've got an observation and then that's just a question. Just back up, I've got to talking about a strong campaign. It's interesting. I think it'd be important for the council to be able to have a strong campaign around it. We need sort of two things I think. One is to really make sure the council's own house is in order on it, so the KPIs and making sure that the houses within the council's own property portfolio are safe and secondly, I think to really make that work, local evidence and a positive campaign as well as targeting. A positive campaign is very, very effective. Usually, you can only change on positives. So, I think some local evidence would be really good if I could to make this. I sort of asked this already, I'm sorry, but is there, we've identified this difficult topic to find this evidence about point source emissions. What would you do in terms of trying to get evidence back to show people, well, look, in Norwich at this time, there's pubs or, and a point on that actually is often pubs, if there are things about aesthetic reasons, they may be more likely to be an open fire, which is worse than a stove. So pubs may tend towards having more open. They look nice, don't they? So that tends to be that might be an issue. But I wanted to ask your advice or your observations on if there's any work going on to look at point sources, if there are any ways to work to look at recording or perhaps an ongoing monitoring programme. Would you have advice on that point?
There certainly are groups in the country done research on essentially trying to understand where particular management comes from. They use more complex measurements, but actually measuring the composition of the plant, not done routine. Searched on behalf. And there are papers which give more detail on that, and some spoken source portion. I can't sort of quote that off some and there are other experts who I know are on board with this. And you often refer to point sources a lot, and you're right, there are point sources, but I'm not quite sure what you're trying to infer by that. But obviously, if you eat roots, avoid in the house, it's going to depend, for example, the research to be done on wood burners, for example, the amount of in the house is a function of the length of time of burning that you have on the how often you rotate and put them. So there's some evidence that the length of time you have to burn on the wall. So this those data can be used. Yes, it takes some time to sort of collate that kind of information. Doing a campaign, I think it's worth it. And I'd just like to throw up one about positive experience. We did some work with
as well. The actual message is used to try to switch up the I think it's a way forward as well to really help.
That's Councillor Manning. I think the timing of Facebook, which is very different. Where for call resident A, resident B, resident A complains about resident B's use of some sort of burning in the home. An awful lot of horrible smoke comes out of his chimneys. In the report, it says that local authorities can investigate complaints about smoke from domestic authorities. Can I tell resident A? Horrible smoke coming from resident B's chimney, we can actually knock on the door. And if so, what's the engagement? My other question is just about the training. We're going through the training here, which is a shame. There's no balance to the discussions, I suppose. But I wanted to do who was invited. Mr. Glee of Norwich, one of the pieces of recourses on one of those. But is there a local national trade association that the council can work on whatever recommendations are in terms of this campaign about responsible use of equipment and not just the first selling of finances and things. But whatever the outcome of today, my key or the local trade association be asked to make that's really the solution in competition having the same recommendations. I think the suggestion of language is an issue. It's something we can definitely adapt to, particularly in relation to we'll talk at the end of this in terms of when recommendations are made and who else we need to hear from before we can come up with our final recommendations. If I can ask you to address resident A and resident B's relationship and resolution.
Certainly, statutory nuisance legislation under the Environmental Protection Act rules that noise nuisance from noise, odour, smoke and fuel. So we certainly have had complaints about smoke from domestic chimneys, and it's usually a case of where I'd just like to respond to your previous question about the association, and there is a state industry association. They have actually responded to the report that was previously written by Dental Context about farmers.
Very helpful, thank you. So, Carlo, next please.
Thank you. I'd like to raise bonfires and domestic properties as it's around to put aside the controversy of bonfires of fire at night and sort of mention people who burn garden waste or other household waste, which seems to me is completely unnecessary, especially because we have a brown waste connection. But when I contacted the council on behalf of various residents who raised it with me about bonfires, council said there's really nothing they can do. So I don't know if there are any powers that the government can have down to local authorities, or whether the government has a view on domestic bonfires. They seem to contribute to the general level of local evolution.
Again, we have had complaints about domestic bonfires, and we would investigate under the statutory nuisance legislation for smoke and fuel. Really, to do anything about it, we would have to happen on a regular basis. So we would tend to just suggest to people that there is the brown bin service, that burning is not an acceptable form of disposal of even just garden vegetation, etc. And just do let that be. But if it was persistent, then yes, we could serve in the abatement notice. And obviously you can't do that in a smoke control.
Sorry, you can use bonfires in smoke controlled areas, but there's specific exemption in the legislation. Yeah, according to the government website. Yeah, and frankly, we should be taking a stance on it, but I think, yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Osborne, you would like to want to come in with your next anyway on my list. So,
Yeah, just to clarify that, would that be public protection deal with that? Would that also involve NSB? I guess I'm thinking particularly in this case on bonfires or fires on council estates. So I think the case for people making burn stuff like that. Council estates and that is needed to be involved. So exactly, I wonder if there's whether there's any public protection to those pieces of road.
When we were called environmental protection officers, we dealt with all of nuisance work. But now it is with the previous area management officers and whatever they're called now, ASB officers or something. So yes, no, it is with them. Usually it comes to us for any enforcement matters. So they will do the investigative work and then we will take the enforcement if it needed to go further.
Generally speaking, if it was on our own property, other means of enforcement, rather than necessarily resulting in statutory change. That's the most
just on the council properties, there are some hotspots in my properties where people don't things from one place to that also to one water. The unit needs to target that single property necessarily. My other sort of point is we have got mentioned about work with psychologists on some communication strategy. Any recommendation that when customers it's something that we engage with specialists at the UVA. I think behaviour changes very often. They checked in council authorities because this council is generally government and it's very near companies that are often
The issue of behaviour change is quite timely. There's been on the radio this morning where they had someone from the current number 10, nudging it in a form of nudging, talking about nudging change in relation to types of additives in food, salt and sugar, in relation to the report that came out today. So, it's an interesting thing around how to change their behaviour to language instead. Councillor Thomas, you were next, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. It seems we have power to do much about anything, doesn't it? But I think we'll agree. We dispute that. And smoke control area, more of the air. And much unique. Counties, knowledge on that. Can I suggest that talk work with partners, estate agents, and you're selling a property to domestic dwellers or licensed property development, domestic dwellers, where those domestic dwellers are, it tends to be not found around. Wood burners, that actually in our communication strategy, talking to reducing asset value. So estate agents who are representing buyers, sellers, might be quite an impact, let's say. Because if you're selling something, buy something which is going to damage the health of your children, that's a huge nudge back. Asset values. Now, with the energy efficiency in properties, my down this group is particulates. Getting the information prospect and that communication strategy. No question.
Interesting point, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions or points to make at this stage? Councillor Jones.
So I was just going to ask Councillor Osborne where he found information about the 68 council as well. That's it. Forward to respond to.
Very helpful, thank you. I mentioned towards the beginning this scrutiny was, as a member of the public who has wanted to be able to present and can't. And although they have submitted to me something to read out, I don't think that actually my reading would do it justice. And I would we seem to have reached a natural breakpoint in our discussion for today. And I'm interested to hear the committee's views on picking this up again at some point in early September, inviting that member along, possibly do it by Zoom, which we can do, and then coming up with our recommendations then. So we've got, and hopefully by that point, maybe also reach out to the licensed trades and trade association related to the retail use of wood burners to get a bit more information. I think actually we've had an hour and a half on this now, which has been really interesting. Some of it's gone in terms of the science, but the evidence is quite clear in terms of the impact it's had on people's health and life. Councillor Osborne, what indicated?
Some recommendations. I would thank them to the recommendations time for so I wonder if there's a draft list of recommendations and perhaps before this would then also not be that makes see what's already happened, make that to do that. And also say engage with particularly on that right already in current.
Councillor Hoffman, Councillor.
So I can understand James' keenest appetite to have those recommendations as early as possible. However, I think that in the interest of good scrutiny and this appointed principle, especially given James has said that we're going to reach out again to people who have not been represented in this room, for example, those selling wood burners, etc. I think that we're not able to genuinely say that we are a committee of scrutiny if we make our recommendations before we've scrutinised all aspects. And I think that from a point of process, it would be absolutely wrong for us to be making recommendations when we've heard some of the evidence without actually hearing the any alternative view, or without it. And if that alternative view doesn't show up, then that's absolutely fine. They've had that opportunity a second time. However, also with regard to the member of the public, while I don't imagine there's going to be a significant disagreement, I would want to make recommendations and then just hear from them as a little bit of window dressing. I'd rather be ensuring that they are involved before we come to any recommendations. It's not because I disagree with the fact we need to have recommendations. You've probably heard and assumed what types of recommendations I've been looking to put forwards. But I do think it's quite important that we follow a proper process, because it will set precedent for how we deal with things in future, and we could then easily end up in a position on a subject where we don't necessarily have consensus across the chamber for things to be essentially gerrymandered at a later point, and citing this as a reason why it would be acceptable.
Thank you. Councillors Osborne, Galvin, Stupid. One thing I will say, simply from a timing perspective, if we were to make interim recommendations today, they are of course recommendations to Cabinet. Cabinet next meets in September. So I know you're concerned, Councillor Osborne, about getting things done quickly, but we've only built 2-month delays because we're considering this in July. It's not such a large step for that to then go into October's Cabinet meeting after having heard from everyone. Yeah.
Just previous discussions we need to have, can you just bring your attention back to paragraph 14 of the mostly prepared intention to forward an article in Citizen magazine. Nothing I've heard, I mean, that was the intention that already had. There's nothing I've heard today that suggests so.
I agree with that.
Just on that specific point, I hope it will be possible to on the point about whether we have interim recommendations here, I understand that there's comments about maximum, but I think that it can help to bring some idea that we have what was the nicest process streaming. I think it's clear that then what the council is thinking about doing. In terms of hearing alternative evidence, yes, we're to hear from other stakeholders, but I mean, it's clear that it's bad for health and then reduce it.
Councillor Gadd.
Yeah, I think it's very good to capture what's happening today work and given the time. Decided to have this meeting now because I'm not having September that make that choice. So we could do something at our first meeting. I just want to say, I think the cabinet process scrutiny, there might not be interim recommendations, there might be draft, but actually sometimes a helpful deliberative process to share where you're at. It isn't necessarily, I really don't see it as prejudging it. I think people could find it helpful to be able to come in as long as you're genuinely presenting and they genuinely are draft. It's more like, you know, what we know that it's not. I don't see it. I firmly don't see it as prejudging it. That's really what I'm suggesting. I'm suggesting that we take a staged approach. That's not how I prefer to do it. Someone who works on our belt to know what to do and make sense.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes, thank you. I think we're not fully informed yet about this particular topic, and I'd like us to contact the health experts for some more information on that. That relates to the question I asked earlier about the levels of exposure and the consequences of exposure. So I'd like to have some more information on that. I'm still considering the effect on the process of coming up with recommendations before we've heard all this evidence. I'm still not convinced that it's a satisfactory a point at which to make recommendations, even if they were draft form before we've heard all the evidence. And just from a scrutiny point of view, and I say it with reluctance.
Thank you. Councillor Jones. Next, and then Councillor Osborne, Councillor Thomas.
Thanks. I was going to suggest, regardless of what we decide regarding interim recommendations, that we perhaps invite the public to the 9th start of 9th September meeting and then make our final recommendations following that. That's likely to be a shorter substantive meeting than 16th September, where we decide to put a substantive item on the agenda. This is an in-depth discussion and to have a 3-hour meeting on the 16th or something.
We'll work on the logistics of that. Councillor Osborne.
Yes, sorry, Chair, apologies, it's rather late in the day, but I've just been checking, and we've got a data set for which we are able to tackle fuel poverty, which maps poverty stock in the city and includes the fuel type, and for main fuel type and second fuel types. We've actually got quite a detailed data set, which I don't think necessarily aware of. It allows to be more granular detail about the prevalence of solid fuel burning in the city by ward down to postcode level. So just, I think there's another level of evidence which would be valuable, which might be broadly better. So apologies, that's a bit late in the day, which the conversation China, I think, got that data set.
Councillor Osborne. Next, yes. I should be next.
I appreciate it. It's said, but I don't see that we have to hear absolutely everything about any before we can start to say it's what we might want to do. Might want to do, it's not this is exactly what we need to do. And you know, if that then has to change, then it has to change. But if it doesn't change, then we're already the game. So I don't see what the problem is. Draft recommendations or just sort of iterations towards recommendations. And when it comes to about health impacts, I mean, Martin I recognition and recognition has health impacts. How that is detail of it with that.
Councillor Thomas.
Thank you. Quite frankly, it's inappropriate in terms of the process of scrutiny to have an interim draft report when we expect the case of prosecution. We really want the other one. I think I know which way I'm going to go. In terms of the scrutiny committee and our process, I'm not sure. Not knowing the process, scrutiny.
So just in terms of what Councillor Osborne said about not seeing a problem with drafting those recommendations at this stage, having not seen all of the evidence at this point. I think that if you think that a lot of committees that this council have are quasi-judicial, and I know that Councillor Stupid sits on one of those, and while we are not, I do think that it would be good practice to uphold that type of viewpoint. When looking, for example, at employment law, you may well be in a position where an employer if an employer said in a meeting that they'd already drafted the outcome letter because they probably know how it's going to go, you'd be quite unhappy about that if that was your employer. Now, the reason I raise that is because actually, if Cabinet acts on our decision and our recommendations, and we end up in a position where, for example, one of our recommendations is that we make the entire of the Golden Triangle a smoke-free, smoke-controlled area. If that was one of our recommendations, and it was agreed by Cabinet, and we were then challenged by someone from the wood burning industry and taken to judicial review over that, we would still have to justify our processes, and therefore that would leave us in an incredibly vulnerable position from the perspective of a judicial review over any decisions that we are making. And I think that rather than, I completely agree with the need to do things at speed, but not at the expense of having a robust process which protects the council and ensures that we are fundamentally making a fair and democratic decision that involves people with alternative viewpoints, people with the same viewpoints, and people who have suggested this topic, such as the member of the public, where I don't know whether they're going to disagree with anything that's been said today or not. Therefore, I think that we do need to ensure the proper process is met, and hopefully we'll be able to achieve some type of consensus. If not, I'd suggest moving to the vote very shortly, because I don't think we're realistically going to achieve that consensus?
On that last point, I was about to get absolutely. I think we're running the risk potentially of spending as long discussing whether we have any recommendations as we have on taking evidence from our experts today. So I've had 3 councillors who've indicated I'll take those points, but we will then rapidly move to a vote if we don't have a consensus. So I've got councillors Giles, Galway, and then Osborne.
I'm going to propose moving to a vote.
Okay, we have a proposal on the table. So
Can I ask a question before we do that?
Yep.
What is the outcome of this meeting? Because, maybe I say that we should have recommendations, is actually so that members of the public can see what has been discussed at the meeting, what the council's thinking is, and argue about the answer. So it's actually a tool for so how will the outcomes of this meeting be presented?
I mean, there's an interesting point because the outcomes of this meeting don't represent the thinking of the council, they represent the thinking of the scrutiny committee. And that's an important distinction because we don't set policy for the council here. We make recommendations to cabinet to consider those policies. The outcome from this meeting, as we minuted as the various discussions, I think actually from my point of view, it's been a very good discussion. I've learned an awful lot about the impacts of wood burners, the impact of other aspects of particulate matter in the environment, which I didn't know before. That will help me inform any decision for recommendations that are subsequently taken. And if that does involve, I'd say the slightly tongue cheek and was a very serious matter, but that does involve a blanket ban on the Golden Triangle. Democratic Services may have a declarations of interest to go through, given the prevalence of cancer there. But Councillor Giles, you have a motion before us, move to allow notice as the Constitution allows to move to a vote. A second of that, please.
Point of order, Chair. Am I right in the Constitution? You don't have substantive discussions on procedural motion.
That is correct. Straight to the vote. So those in favour of we're moving to a vote. So those the vote presumably is that we defer this to the next meeting. So those in favour of deferring this to the next meeting. Those against? That is carried. So we will pick this up at the beginning of September. The draft minutes get published. There is a draft minute. So draft minutes will be available. They will show much of the discussion that's taking place. A version of it will be available on the council's YouTube channel. Quality isn't brilliant, but that will be there as well. So, thank you to Claire and Leslie. We have 2 more items to deal with our agenda today. If you don't need to stay for those, you're very welcome to. I suggest you might not want to, but thank you very much for your time and for helping with our deliberations today. I'm just going to so we're now going to whiz back to item 5. We have no report for item 5 because we currently have no rep on NCOSC. We'll deal with that at the next meeting of the Scrutiny Committee. And item 6 is the Scrutiny Committee work programme. In order to slightly short circuit much of the discussion on this, there was a proposal by Councillor Osborne. So, Councillor Galvin. Apologies. So, Councillor Oliver is no longer on this committee, and therefore we don't until we have a tabled item on the agenda for this committee to elect a new rep on this, which will happen in September meeting.
Do we know how many meetings went off with this?
We missed today's meeting.
Highlight the government itself, most important constitution and substitute for vacant positions. I wasn't able to
correct me if I'm right, is that a ruling of the county council? It's a county council constitutional position that you won't able to attend, not a city council constitutional position. If that really makes much difference, but Councillor Osborne, I believe you're looking at finance, and I'm going to bring in Councillor Thornton McAllister to make a suggestion in relation to that.
It's basically first.
Yeah.
It's specifically looking at where we can get finance from. There's quite a lot of work going on around refinance as a parliamentary group, sustainable finance. There's resource accounting, with in effect a kind of EFI, but it's slightly better to raise money for renewable energy investments and energy efficiency investments. Various councils are piloting investment bonds. There's obviously some forms of finance the council already has grants and savings funding. Proposal is to have a look at where you get finance for the investment from currently, where else could we get it from, where local government, what are those opportunities from. There's a range of experts to hear from on that. There's maybe 100 in the presentation. The economy commission last week for the works we want on sustainable finance. Quite a lot in there. So the reason for proposing it in September meeting is so that it's for the budget.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor,
Yes.
just discussion beforehand, and then Councillor Jarve after that.
Yeah, so one of the proposals which I was looking at putting forward was for us to evaluate our strategy coming out of COVID in terms of rebuilding the local economy. And I think that we don't have a very good discussion about this, Jenny. But one of the things that I want to ensure is that we can actually look at both of those. And I think they could be quite complementary in terms of we will need to find additional financing. We've taken huge hits to our revenues, and a lot of that can hopefully come from greener sectors. In addition to that, obviously there's the what do we do to regenerate the local economy, and hopefully again a lot of the other aspects of this can feed in. We should already have a lot of the papers and documentation ready for the COVID element of things. So it's only the stuff specific to green financing which would need to be produced in any case. And in terms of looking at the Scrutiny work programme, we've done things a little bit differently this year in terms of not setting it at the very beginning of the year, which has meant that we'll be setting things in November. And I don't want to miss the opportunity to put this in ahead of budget. However, I do think that the priority, if you ask most Norwich residents, would be about our economic recovery coming out of the biggest economic hit that we've had in the last 100 years.
Councillor Jarve and Councillor Osborne.
Yes, I was going to propose we have the broader post-COVID inverted commas, perhaps post-lockdown might be appropriate economic strategy as set out on the topic and to the June reviews. So we may be some scrutiny numbers however, I would propose that not focusing exclusively on finance
I absolutely agree with the importance of the from COVID and that can include being behind that. My statement is that the green finance is an opportunity, and looking at what Scrutiny as a way to do and where it works well is where we hear from experts as we have done today, and you know, have a chance to have detailed discussion and questions. And I think that on the finance topic, there's opportunities to do that. Excellent. Questions in detail. On the wider topic of the economic recovery from COVID, that may be more difficult to do. I mean, or maybe there are a big up here what experts want to hear from or residents. Yes, that is basically a massive topic that Scrutiny works well, and there is a focus to it. But you know, if the committee wants to bundle it together, fine. I'm against it. I'm just
Let's go.
Make sure it's not managed because
Can I make a proposal? I think we've had a broad consensus here. So could I suggest that perhaps myself and the Vice Chair and someone from the Council that was born get together outside of the meeting to just basically work up a proper scope that can then be put into action for September rather than keeping out lots of ideas here at the moment. So I'm happy with that approach. So this would then be the item that's looked at on the 16th of September. And on the 9th of September, we're having a sort of work program setting event, plus possible use of that opportunity for setting from the public in relation to one of those and any others are available to come along and invite following the discussions today. I think on that, all cases afterwards.
Yeah, can I just make a couple of suggestions for who we might consult ahead of that major item on the 16th, and that would be to identify the relevant industries within Norwich to whom we can seek some feedback and approach here from those. I'm thinking specifically, obviously the licensing industry comes to mind. We've got taxi drivers that have been affected by the pandemic, shopkeepers, whole retail industry. Every industry has been affected in one way or another. It'd be interesting to hear how they've been affected and what ideas they've got for solutions, especially if they're green solutions.
Chair, I'd be clear if anyone's free for some representative from the left. I thought it was very useful to have representation. Very visiting if there is anyone that is useful, so we have a lot of clout and a lot of money.
But it might be interesting also if we can find someone from the sort of financial sector who can talk about the green financing options that are available. Great. Thanks very much, everyone.
Can I just say that I think there was a proposal for us to do vitamin and coming up with this task commission tomorrow, and the potential on that meeting at Hancock. So if you want to talk about that now.
So this will be used to end this. Members of the subcommittee, Councillor Stevens was obviously chairing that, Councillor Everett, Councillor Giles, Councillor Osborne, and myself. So we'll finish this meeting formally and then just see if we can just something. And you will be available to just tomorrow. No, okay.
I'm happy to host the event.
James, I can set up a Zoom meeting.
We'll finish this meeting now and then we'll have a quick chat about that. So thanks very much, everyone.